every good work. I was thinking the other day about whenever we gather here and during the course of the debates, we refer to one another as honorable members. So I did a search on the word honorable, and I'm going to tell you what it means. Honorable means upright, honest, worthy of respect. The word honorable has to do with people and actions that are honest, fair. An honorable person is someone who believes in truth and doing the right thing and tries to live up to those high principles. For example, an honorable athlete who loses a game will still shake hands with the opponent and congratulate them. Honorable actions include helping others, not taking advantage of others, putting service above personal gain, resisting bribes, quid pro quo, and nepotism. As I was thinking about the whole issue of being honorable, the question is, in a place such as this house, everyone is automatically referred to as honorable. But the question I have is that a nominal title or a substantive title? And that's the question that each person must answer for themselves. So I want to encourage you today to remember to live up to the name that you are called in this house, which is honorable members. Amen?
Amen.
Let's bow our heads. Father God, we thank you for another day. Lord, we thank you for the sunshine. We thank you for the good weather. And we thank you for life, health, and strength. God, we ask you for wisdom today as we deliberate so that we would make the best decisions on behalf of the Bahamian people. We pray for order, decency, and decorum during this process, and we thank you for a favorable outcome. In Jesus' name, amen. Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever.
Good morning, honorable members. Honorable members, when the business of this house suspended on yesterday evening, the honorable member for Carmichael reserved the chair for the honorable member for Mount Moriah. The chair now recognizes the honorable member for Mount Moriah.
Mr. Speaker, I deem it an absolute privilege to confidently rise in this honorable house as I make my contributions to the 2021-2022 budget debate. Mr. Speaker, a strong family structure is very important, if not the most important factor in the life of any successful individual, including politicians. Having somewhere to go and to call home is essential. Having someone to love as a family is priceless. And having both is a blessing. Mr. Speaker, I am blessed and grateful for a home and most importantly, a family. Truer words, Mr. Speaker, were never spoken when it was said that a man is usually a reflection of his wife and family. Stacy, my wife, is the glue that keeps us all timed on task and my biggest supporter. My children, Joshua and Kai, remind me that the work I do is for their future and the future of all Bahamian children. To my wife and children, I say thank you for being my greatest inspiration. Mr. Speaker, an unknown author once stated, "No one is irreplaceable, but some folks you never want to have to replace." The people of Mount Moriah constituency are among the folks that I would never want to replace. Specifically, I am grateful to the F&M Council of Mount Moriah constituency, my consultative committee, and the associations of Yellow Elder, Millennium, and Stapleton Gardens. To my constituents in Mount Moriah, as your representative, I know how difficult the last 15 months have been. There was great uncertainty and an immeasurable amount of turmoil, despair in your lives, the loss of jobs, the inability to meet financial obligations such as mortgage, rent, utility bills, and perhaps the thought of not knowing where the next meal was coming from. As your member of Parliament, I have sat and listened to your stories and rendered assistance where I could have, because we are all in this fight together. Mr. Speaker, in fact, the entire world has been tossed into this global experience that has brought immense pain and despair. But I am here to tell you today that while we are not perfect, you can take comfort in the fact that you have the right leader and a competent government in place to get you through this most difficult challenge in your lifetime. While there remains much work to be done, over the last 4 years, we have been able to accomplish a great deal of work to improve the constituency one household at a time. All of the individual time and talents and treasures were all important and have provided a better quality of life and economic development opportunities for you, the constituents of Mount Moriah. Mr. Speaker, I wish to extend a belated Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers in the Mount Moriah constituency. Despite not having our annual celebration, we did recognize our mothers and had fun doing so at our virtual Mother's Day giveaway, Mount Moriah style. To the fathers in our constituency, no worries, because our virtual Father's Day giveaway is right around the corner. As a matter of fact, it's scheduled for September 9th, for Saturday, June 19th, 2021. And I encourage all fathers in the constituencies to register online via our Mount Moriah Facebook page. Mr. Speaker, day after day, we see and hear countless stories of first world countries such as the United States and those in Europe and France, the UK, and Italy and others, Canada, all fighting one common enemy. The World Health Organization, Mr. Speaker, has confirmed that 173,005,553 positive cases of COVID-19. Meanwhile, the Bahamas has recorded some 12,024 positive cases, according to the Ministry of Health. Further, for the Bahamas, this pandemic was preceded by Hurricane Dorian, which devastated our northern islands in September of 2019. This is by far the worst global crisis in over 100 years. Mr. Speaker, I want to impress upon Bahamians that increased healthcare demands and socioeconomic challenges associated with COVID-19 are a global problem and not exclusive to the Bahamas. It is one in which no government in the world was immune from. This minister's administration is doing its best given the circumstances. The decision made by our government prior to Dorian and during COVID-19 allows us to maintain our economic stability and ensures that all Bahamians will persevere and exit this pandemic more resilient than ever before. Mr. Speaker, this is not make-believe or hocus-pocus government or governance, as we were accustomed to under the previous administration. Pure and simple, this is accountable, transparent governance by this minister-led administration. In retrospect, if you believe the side opposite when they give the impression that if they had been the government today, this would have been a non-issue, or I suppose they would have found a cure and created their own vaccine, distributed it, and made this pandemic magically disappear. This is totally absurd. All of a sudden, they have become expert scientists, economists, and strategists of all kinds. In actuality, all they would have done is burrow us into oblivion, hire consultants in the form of friends, families, and lovers with no accountability whatsoever. Mr. Speaker, ours is a government of transparency and accountability. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas is a small nation state that is heavily reliant on tourism. Statistics indicate that 70% of our workforce is directly and indirectly connected to the industry. The United Nations World Tourism Organization predicts that the COVID-19 pandemic is anticipated to result in a possible 20 to 30% contraction in the tourism sector in 2020. Consequently, even after travel restrictions are lifted, the COVID-19 pandemic is still expected to have long-lasting effects on tourism industry. In light of the above, the socioeconomic impact could have devastating consequences if our administration didn't consider the human implication of COVID-19 pandemic. Our government did not simply provide lip service and empty promises to thousands of Bahamians affected by this crisis. We trusted and relied on our professionals, primary in the public sector, to chart the way for a safer passage through both of these unprecedented occurrences. Mr. Speaker, this minister-led administration introduced the Resilient Bahamas Plan, which was anchored in engendering well-being and confidence, maintaining economic stability, and planting seeds for accelerated recovery. Specifically, the plan focused on one, a $25.9 million investment in public health and safety measures. Two, a $118 million investment in government-funded unemployment assistance for unemployed and self-employed Bahamians. Three, a $32.8 million investment in social assistance to support food assistance program. Four, a $44.4 million investment in the government's payroll support programs. And five, a $53.3 million investment in the domestic economy for business continuity to support Bahamian entrepreneurs and small businesses. Mr. Speaker, purposeful debates are healthy to any democratic system of government. However, when misleading statements are made by those who are seeking to lead our nation, They only serve to undermine investors' confidence and further add to the pain and misery already being felt by Bahamians as a result of this pandemic. Mr. Speaker, members on the side opposite continue to engage in partisan politics, which they have become so famous for. They purposely and knowingly fail to acknowledge good governance principles and best practices. But what do you expect from a government who, prior to us coming into office, made history by spearheading arguably the worst government in our nation's history? Mr. Speaker, this minutes-led government is no hocus pocus, out of focus government. The member for Kalani deserves credit for the manner in which he has been able to maintain course despite the many storms he has had to endure during his time in office. As he is no stranger to saving lives, rest assured, my fellow Bahamians, he will safely guide us through these challenging times. Under his leadership, we will persevere. Better him than the crew who got shipwrecked in 2017 in calm seas and still can't find their way home. Mr. Speaker, I would like to remind Bahamians that prior to 2017, under the last administration, the Bahamas received 3 credit downgrades, 4, as a matter of fact, by Standard & Poor's, and 3 credit downgrades by Moody's during 2012-13 to 2016-17 fiscal years. Before the dual crisis, the country's deficits prior to the FNM being elected was calculated at some $660 million, or 5.4% of GDP. Upon coming to office, we sought to reduce the nation's debt, and we did exactly that. In the fiscal year 2017 to 18, we reduced the national debt to $450 million, or 3.3% of GDP. This reflected an approximate $245 million difference just after one term. The following year, 2018-19, it was further reduced to $215 million, or 1.7% of GDP. This reflected a $200 million difference. Just imagine if there were no Dorian and no COVID-19 during our term in office. If our term in office was as smooth as the previous administration. You can imagine. Mr. Speaker, despite all that we have endured beginning in 2019, we were still able to rescue our economy from the brink of disaster. At the end of May 2017, our foreign reserves stood at $954.3 million, according to the Central Bank quarterly report. At the end of March 2021, foreign reserves stood at $2,250.7 million, according to the Central Bank Quarterly Statistic Digest for the period ending March 2021. This represents an increase of $1,296.4 million over the period. Please note that much of the increase in foreign reserves is attributed to, 1, the FNM's government putting Bahamians first and making a conscious decision to adjust the composition of its borrowing to favor more foreign currency borrowing due to the COVID-19 pandemic, to shore up its reserves. And two, the Central Bank of the Bahamas limiting repatriation of funds since the onset of the pandemic locally to also protect the Bahamas' foreign reserves position amidst the global pandemic and reduce foreign currency earning traditionally associated with tourism revenue. Mr. Speaker, while some may not agree with everything we have done during this crisis, I can accept that. However, the fact remains that we were never here before, and these are unprecedented times. The situation warranted decisive leadership and responsible decision-making. This minutes-led administration, Mr. Speaker, is all about making decisions not in the best interest of a select few, but in the interest of the Bahamian people and the future of our nation. Mr. Speaker, according to the World Bank, while families across the globe are still experiencing devastating ramifications from the COVID-19, governmental assistance continues to provide a critical lifeline for the most vulnerable in our society. Our administration continues to do just that. Our comprehensive response provides supportive policies coupled with various social protection programs for all communities throughout the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, our government's efforts to get its population vaccinated should be commended, as there is no doubt that there is tied to successful recovery of our economy. Right. Your children's future and that of our nation are tied to us controlling this virus. It is a known fact that those countries who are leading the world in vaccination are witnessing tremendous declines in the positivity rate and are gradually returning to some form of normalcy. Mr. Speaker, I would like to encourage everyone within the sound of my voice that if you are not vaccinated, go and get vaccinated and disregard the misleading comments and conspiracy theories. Mr. Speaker, the IMF stated that vaccinations will be a driving force in economic recovery. The more people that are vaccinated, the better the economic outlooks for nations across the globe. There has been a global response by governments to render vaccination to their citizens. To date, 1.78 billion doses of vaccines have been administered globally, with 62.183 doses have been administered, 62,000 that is, in the Bahamas. The IMF report further indicated a projected stronger recovery for global economies compared to January's forecast. In the latter part of the year, world economies are expected to grow 6% in 2021 and 4.4% in 2022. Mr. Speaker, our administration's 2021-2022 budget plan, Accelerating Recovery from Restoration to Growth, seeks to advance three crucial aspects that will lead to more effective, efficient, and equitable governance in the Bahamas. The three interrelated variables are: one, realizing a sustainable future through a new vision for the nation; two, initiating new decision-making processes necessary to address the complex and interconnected issues facing our nation; and three, fostering new leadership in key sectors of our nation. Mr. Speaker, countries that place safety and security at the forefront of their economy are often stable and welcoming to investors. Successive governments have always placed a high priority on safety and security. And in spite of the situation, the commitment and concrete action undertaken by our law enforcement agencies in maintenance of law and order and protecting our vast maritime domain facilitating elections preparedness, assisting in enforcement of the emergency orders, and providing health and security services for the incarcerated are all commendable. Mr. Speaker, permit me, if you will, with the remainder of my time, to address my stewardship as Minister of National Security and outline the contributions of the men and women at our ministry and the agencies that fall under my remit. Mr. Speaker, overall, the agencies within our ministry's portfolio experience increases in their recurring budgets and decreases in overall capital expenditures. The cumulative budgetary allocation for the Ministry of National Security and its agencies for the fiscal period 2021-2022 is $255,137,985. This reflects a 3% increase over last year's budget of $247,043,823. Mr. Speaker, out of this figure, the Ministry of National Security has been allocated $25,657,180. This reflects a 6% decrease over the previous period. The Royal Bahamas Police Force, Mr. Speaker, was allocated $124,869,274, which reflect a 2% increase of $2,600,467 compared to last fiscal period. This increase was realized in the following areas. 1, recruitment, 2, salary adjustments for promotions, and 3, operational costs due to COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force has been allocated $68,833,512. This reflects a 1% increase, or $941,858 compared to last year, where $67,946,654 was allocated. The increases in the recurrent were realized in the following areas. 1, salary adjustments for promotions, 2, recruitment, 3, food, and 4, operational requirements. Mr. Speaker, 1,224,000 will service recruitment, and an additional 300,000 will be allocated to salary adjustments attributed to promotions. The remaining sum, or 1,159,000, will go to operational costs relative to rent, food, and other supplies in this COVID-19 environment. It should be noted, Mr. Speaker, however, that the Royal Bahamas Defense Force's 2021-2022 recurrent estimates increased by some $4.3 million. The Bahamas Department of Corrections has been allocated some $31,077,999 for recurrent expenditure. This reflects an 11% increase of some $3,178,758 over last year. This increase was realized in the following areas. 1, salary adjustments for promotion. 2, recruitment and uniform allowances for new officers. 3, increments for current officers. 4, food. 5, operational requirements. Mr. Speaker, 1,020,000 will service recruitment, and an additional 200,000 will be allocated for uniform allowance. $800,000 was allocated towards food and other supplies during this COVID-19 period, while $172,000 will be allocated to operational costs. Meanwhile, $1,785,751 has been allocated for salaries, increments, and adjustments to salary. Mr. Speaker, the Parliamentary Registration Department has been allocated a recurrent expenditure of some $4,700,020. This reflects a 210% increase of some $3,187,786 compared to last fiscal period. The increase in expenditure of some $4,085,469 is to assist in the preparation for the upcoming general elections, school board election, and associated expenses. Mr. Speaker, since coming to office, our government's primary focus as it relates to national security was to restore confidence in our law enforcement agencies, foster a spirit of professionalism, equip our agencies with the necessary tools to effectively prevent, combat crime, and other social ills, and to build genuine partnership with our local communities. Despite the challenges faced by our administration over the last 4 years, we are pleased to report that we remain committed to our promise to the Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, permit me to share with you how our government was able to deliver on its mandate to the Bahamian people by focusing on 8 key areas. 1, the Ministry of National Security Agency's achievement. 2, progressive legislative transformation. 3, technological advancement. 4, capital asset acquisition or infrastructural development. 5, human capital investment or recruitment and training. 6, electoral reforms or modernization of the electoral process. 7, multi-agency partnership. And 8, taking care of our own. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of National Security's achievement. Allow me to go on record to say, without any fair contradiction, that our men and women in uniform performed at an exceptional level over the last 4 years. And as their minister, I am extremely grateful and exceedingly proud of their commitment and dedication to service, especially during what can arguably be referred to as the most challenging period in our nation's history. Allow me, Mr. Speaker, to share some of the highlights of the various agencies. 1, I begin with the Royal Bahamas Police Force. Records indicate that between 2017, and this is our time, 2017 to 2020, there were 18,332 incidents of major crimes reported to the police. For the previous period, 2012 to 2015, there were 40,108 incidents of major crimes reported to the police. Mr. Speaker, this reflects a 54% decrease over the previous period. In other words, Mr. Speaker, this minister-led administration, major crimes were reduced more than half under this minister-led administration. For the offense of murder, Mr. Speaker, between 2017 to 2020, there were 430 incidents reported during the period. For the previous period, between 2012 to 2016, there were 609 incidents of murders reported, a decrease of 179 incidents over the previous period, or 29% decrease. In other words, under this minister-led administration, murder incidents decreased by 1/3. Mr. Speaker, for the offense of armed robbery for the period 2017 to 2020, there have been some 1,893 incidents reported by the police. For the previous period, 2012 to 2016, there were 4,798 incidents, which have, so in other words, Mr. Speaker, armed robberies would have been reduced by some 61% under this minister-led administration. Mr. Speaker, let us look at the category of rape. For the period 2017 to 2020, there have been 194 incidents of rape reported by the police. For the previous period, between 2012 to 2016, there were 438 incidents of rape. We have successfully, as a government, with the aid and assistance of our law enforcement agencies, reduced rape in this country by some 56% under the minister-led administration. So rapes were reduced by more than half, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, however, it is not lost on us that 2019, we had 37 reported matters, and during 2020, there were 50, which was an upswing in the reported matters. But nevertheless, when you take the cumulative period, rapes would have been reduced by more than half, 56% as a matter of fact. So, Mr. Speaker, the reason why this government has made the offense of rape a key focus in the Prime Minister's delivery unit. Mr. Speaker, for the offense of housebreaking, for the period 2017 to 2020, there has been 4,028 incidents reported to the police. For the previous period, 2012 to 2016, there were 9,226 incidents reported to the police. Again, Mr. Speaker, we have successfully reduced housebreaking under this minister-led administration by some 56%, or more than half. Mr. Speaker, the reason for these extremely significant decreases are many, but it would be remiss of me if I failed to acknowledge the role the National Neighborhood Watch Council, led by its chairman, Mr. Keno Wong, is playing in communities throughout the Bahamas in partnership with the police to reduce community-related crimes such as housebreaking. Mr. Speaker, for the offense of firearm between 2017 and 2020, there were some 1,250 seizures. For the previous period, there were some 2,019 firearms seized. In other words, firearm seizures decreased by some 38%, or 1/3. The RBPF work in this area is commendable, and let me explain. Between 2019 and 2020, the police reported a more than 40% decrease in detected gunshots across New Providence. From January to May 2021, the period under review, there have been 129 firearms and 1,806 rounds of ammunition seized. Included in that seizure were 105 pistols, 9 revolvers, 4 shotguns, and 11 high-powered rifles. And these high-powered rifles, Mr. Speaker, are of great concern to us, and certainly the Royal Bahamas Police Force, because as you can see, one incident that we would have experienced early in the year where we had multiple persons shot and killed. And so there is an effort currently being undertaken by the police to focus in this area. With the aid of local and international partnership, technologies like ShotSpotter and intelligence-driven policing, the police force continues to reduce the amount of firearms on our streets. While there's still a long way to go in ridding firearms off of our streets, I commend the commissioner and his officers, as well as the Commodore and his officers, for the work that they continue to do collectively to rid firearms off our streets. And it will be remiss if I fail to acknowledge the other law enforcement agencies as well, Customs and Immigration. Mr. Speaker, let me be the first to say that the numbers as presented are very encouraging and lends to the fact that we are truly heading in the right direction as it relates to crime and crime reduction. However, this year, while overall crime is showing an 8% reduction, we are seeing increases in some key areas, in two key areas, as a matter of fact. So despite the fact that presently crime is down 8%, our concern certainly is in the area of homicide and armed robberies, where in homicide, presently, the numbers are up some 52%, and in armed robberies, that they're up some 42%. But we still have more than half the year to go, and the commissioner and his team are working assiduously to reduce those numbers. This uptick appears to be a global trend, but it is also a reminder that there remains much work ahead of us. Mr. Speaker, guns, drugs, violence are all interrelated, and the police, being aware of the same, are actively involved in monitoring the importation and exportation and possession. And so from January 1 to May 2021, the two major types of drugs seized were cocaine and marijuana. The former resulted in some 408 pounds of cocaine taken off of our streets. The latter reflected marijuana seizures in various forms, including 400 pounds of marijuana, 540 marijuana plants, some 2,156 packages of marijuana gummies. The seizures resulted in some 540 persons being arrested, of which 437 were charged before the courts. Mr. Speaker, as it relates to traffic fatalities, between 2017 and 2020, there were 223 matters. For the previous 4 years, between 2012 and 2016, there were 228. In other words, comparing both periods, traffic fatalities decreased under this minister-led administration, not by much, but a decrease. So that is a positive sign by some 2%. Mr. Speaker, no one could have predicted the national implications of COVID-19 on the Bahamas. Since the first emergency orders were implemented in March of 2020, the police force, along with the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, has been at the forefront for a safe and healthy Bahamas. The COVID-19 enforcement unit at the Cable Beach Police Station, under the command of Chief Superintendent Shivago Deems, forms the basis of the COVID-19 Command Center and was established on 3rd of August 2020 and consists of civilian monitors, dispatchers, and ambassadors who work along with police officers. The program is operational on New Providence, Grand Bahama, Abaco, Exuma, and Bimini. And Mr. Speaker, if I may add, these officers are performing at an exceptional level. And I often hear it, Mr. Speaker, as I move throughout this island from persons in businesses and in communities. The unit is responsible for coordinating national activities in partnership with the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Tourism, and Civil Aviation to ensure that both Bahamians and visitors adhere to the health and safety protocols of the emergency orders. I would like to thank the officers, the monitors, dispatchers, and ambassadors for the wonderful job that they are doing in regulating businesses and the general public. Your work and dedication helps to keep us all safe. While most of our citizens have and continue to follow health and safety protocols, there are select members who fail to adhere to the stipulations. Since the COVID-19 Center was established, there were approximately 1,940 emergency order violations committed, resulting in 1,020,550 in fines. As it relates to statistics from this area, there were a total of 62 persons arrested with reference to fraudulent COVID-19 test results. 52 of these persons were convicted and fines totaling $117,500. Mr. Speaker, the airport ambassadors remain focused and are vigilant in enforcing the enforcement orders as it relates to the inter-island travel. 523 persons attempted to travel without proper documents and were denied by COVID-19 ambassadors at their various checkpoints. COVID-19 ambassadors were also posted on beaches during holidays and special operations to ensure that beachgoers were following COVID beach protocols. Periodic checks were also made at parks, and a total of 1,346 beach visits were conducted during the period in review. Officers and ambassadors conducted some 39,363 business establishment visits. So you can see the amount of stresses that this is certainly putting on our Royal Bahamas Police Force and Defense Force, as a matter of fact. Of this number, this 39,363 business establishment visits, of this number, some 331 businesses were found in breach of the emergency orders for operating a prohibited business. For the most part, Mr. Speaker, the majority of the businesses are adhering to COVID-19 protocols. And CEU continues to encourage business owners and managers alike to keep their customers and employees safe. Mr. Speaker, our administration has made significant investments in the Royal Bahamas Police and Defense Forces with the view of improving their maritime domain across the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. For migrant interdiction, between 2017 to 2020, there were 1,229 migrants apprehension. For the previous period, 2012 to 2016, there were some 4,746 migrants apprehension. In other words, the number of migrants interdictions decreased by some 74%. Don't be dismayed. This is an encouraging sign, as a matter of fact. The significant decreases can be attributed to improved operational strategies and partnerships, the decentralization of the Royal Bahamas Defense Forces, the radar installations in partnership with the United States, and improved intelligence gathering. The downward trend continued for 2021, period from January 1 to May 31st, when there were 9 migrant interdictions that resulted in the apprehension of some 85 migrants. This was inclusive of some 65 Cubans, 23 Haitians. For the same period in 2020, there were 7 migrant interdictions, which reflected a 29% decrease. In other words, the numbers of migrants interdicted again decreased by some 75. Mr. Speaker, for poaching and illegal fishing incidents between 2017 and 2020, there were a total of some 21 vessels apprehended, resulting in the seizure of some 138,750 pounds of assorted fisheries. For the same period, 2012 to 2016, there were a total of 18 poaching vessels interdicted, resulted in 76,000 pounds of fisheries assortment. This represented a 10% increase in vessel seizure and 55% increase in fisheries product seized. Now, Mr. Speaker, as I said before, the RBDF has increased its operational and maritime domain strategy. And as a result, because of their increased presence and the fact now that they're decentralizing and we're using technology to drive results, we're seeing these positive results under this administration. So we're focused as a government, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me turn to the Bahamas Department of Corrections. Mr. Speaker, the rehabilitative programs that the department have been proving effective as we continue year over year to see a downward trend in the recidivism rate. The year 2020 was no exception, as recidivism rate fell to 12% compared to 14% during the previous year. This is in itself a testimony that the Department of Corrections is effecting correctional reform. Mr. Speaker, I have just outlined some of the key accomplishments of those agencies under my remit. Let me conclude this area by saying this. Much of these agencies are called upon to do more, often not reflected in the statistic sheets. We are indebted to our men and women in uniform. And this is one of the reasons why our heroes in uniform are so special and deserve every recognition that they can get. Mr. Speaker, let's look at some progressive legislative transformation. Number 2, during our tenure in office, term in office, we thought it prudent to alter the fabric of Bahamian society through legislation and balance and maintain law and order. In 2018, we introduced a compendium of legislation in the form of Financial Transactions Reporting Act and Proceeds of Crime. The objective of the former is to reform and standardize the way financial institutions report their transactions so as to ensure integrity and credibility and confidence and respectability in our financial sector. But back to our nation as a whole. The latter imposes legislation that would expose all persons, organizations, companies involved in criminal activity, cover-ups, and conspiring with others to conceal their ill-gotten gains by whatever means necessary. Our administration, Mr. Speaker, this minister-led administration did not stop here. We continued with the establishment of an Anti-Terrorism Amendment Act. The objective was to provide a more comprehensive, contemporary, and legislative framework to counter terrorist activities, including targeting of all assets, financial and otherwise, that are related to terrorist activity, More importantly, Mr. Speaker, it criminalizes terrorism, the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, and the financing of terrorism. It also provides for the detection and prevention and prosecutions and conviction and punishment of all such activities. Mr. Speaker, the jury system is a crucial component in the cycle of our criminal justice sector, and it was also in desperate need of reform. The Juries Act of 2020 allows for a verdict in the conviction of murder in capital cases by 12 persons that attracts the death penalty. Further, an amendment has been made under this government, which allows for 9-person jury in all matters other than murders or treason. In every other case, other than cases where the penalty of death is affixed, the verdict may be found, given, and returned by a panel of 6. So this is transformation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in 2019, we brought the Road Traffic Act, which changed the name of the offenses from reckless and dangerous driving to vehicular manslaughter, thereby sending a stronger message to those who continue to drive recklessly on our streets without any regard for human life. Offenders are now liable and may be subject to a term of imprisonment not exceeding 15 years. Prior to this change, persons who killed in the course of dangerous driving were either given a slap on the wrist or a fine for taking a life. This government recognized that that was a problem, and so we changed it. Mr. Speaker, in 2019, we introduced the National Criminal Intelligence Agency Act with the objective of enhancing the security of the Bahamas. The NCIA, as it is called, is the primary agency responsible for gathering, analyzing, coordinating, disseminating, and reflecting the complex overlapping of both domestic and international security issues. NCIA also seeks to establish channels of communication and overseas agencies for the promotion and exchange of information to advance the safety of our nation. And so, Mr. Speaker, we are taking, as a government, we understand the importance of such an agency to any country's national security. And we're taking a very methodical approach to ensure that this agency develops into an agency that all Bahamians can be proud of. And I am pleased to report, Mr. Speaker, that the Prime Minister has approved former Commissioner of Police, Mr. Anthony Ferguson, to be this agency's first director. And so congratulations to Mr. Ferguson. And we know that a man with the highest degree of integrity and respect, both locally and internationally, and we know that he will represent us well. Mr. Speaker, in 2020, we brought the Bail Act, and the objective behind this was to be tougher on crime and remove the presumption for bail. The enactment improves upon the existing system by increasing the jurisdiction of magisterial court to grant bail in certain cases. Mr. Speaker, in 2020, the Parliamentary Election Act allowed for the introduction of a permanent register, and we're reaping the benefits of that today. This allows for the modernization of the voters' registration process by making provisions for electronic biometric data cards to replace the paper cards. This also reduces costs associated with registering the same list of voters over and over and over again. Mr. Speaker, in 2020, there was a compendium of amendment bills for both the Bahamas Department of Corrections and the Royal Bahamas Police Force. You see, Mr. Speaker, some would come and want you to think that this that ours is not a caring government. And they will speak as if they are the greatest supporters of our law enforcement agencies. But there is nothing on record to show that they're putting their money where their mouth is. But this government is. And so we created that pendium of amendment bills to the Royal Bahamas Defense Force and the Bahamas of Corrections Act. Okay, and so now the Bahamas Department of Correction now extends their retirement age of subordinate correctional officers. All right, from age 50 to 55. Could have been done a long time ago. Many of our subordinate officers in the Bahamas Department of Correction were retiring too early. But this government fixed that. This increase brings the much needed parity, and we're working on parity. Some people talk it, but we're delivering on it. Okay, much needed parity to our law enforcement agency. And we're saying that the Bahamas Department of Corrections, the officers, and I want the officers at the Bahamas Department of Corrections, especially the junior ones, to know that this government has your best interests at heart. There was a time when we came into office, when you reached that age of retirement and you had to apply for your retirement as a sergeant, and you had to go home until you hear back from public service, that meant now that your salary was suspended until you hear back from public service, and sometimes that took months on end. All right, and many correctional officers struggle because they have their mortgages. All right, and this was a system that continued to persist until we fixed it. And Cabinet agreed that we will not interrupt anymore the retirement process while someone is applying for re-engagement. And okay? So that vexing problem was fixed by this government. And it could have been fixed by others as well. So some of us talk it, but this is a government that delivers on it. Okay? Mr. Speaker, the increase brings this, I talked about the parity. For the latter, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force increases the age of enlistment of Marines to attract a pool of even more qualified persons. In addition, relatable matters address re-engagement. So Marines now, you can enlist now at 30. Okay? In addition, relatable matters address the re-engagements and continuation of service, the retirement age of warrant officers. And when we came to office, this was a complaint, a concern. Again, many brilliant, you had these warrant officers having to retire at a young age. Brain drain could have been addressed. But what happened? They had to wait. They had to wait on us, man. They had to wait on us, Darren. You know it. You're a man you're close in this situation. So, Mr. Speaker, the retirement age now has been moved up. Okay, the ultimate goal was to ensure that the agency did not lose institutional knowledge. Mr. Speaker, in 2019, the sexual offenses regulation was tabled in this honorable House by this government, which allowed for the establishment of the sexual offenses registry. The objective behind the registry is to ensure the reporting requirements and tracking of sexual offenses following the release of offenders from prison. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to report again that we're a government that don't waste time, that just last month the government approved the appointment of Dr. Rochelle Lightburn, a trained psychologist, to serve as the registrar for that registry. So congratulations to you, Dr. Lightburn. Mr. Speaker, rehabilitation of offenders. Despite the fact that this act was enacted, this bill was enacted in 2007, follow me now, and amended and put in the dust file in 2015. Okay, so it was acted in 2007, it was put in the dust file in 2000, it was amended and then put away. Okay? It took a caring government, Hubert Minnis-led government, to remove that file from permanent storage. And the result of it speaks for itself. To date, this government would have expunged the records of some 28 Bahamians with 85 applications pending, and it's growing by the day because the message is getting out. And meanwhile, 24 of those cases had been referred to the Prerogative of Mercy's Board, which is expected to meet sometime this month. Mr. Speaker, ours is a caring government, I say, and we have the record to prove it. So please, let me explain what I mean by that. Mr. Speaker, since coming into office under the Prerogative of Mercy Committee, some 209 inmates serving time at the Bahamas Department of Corrections were granted clemency. Some 209 inmates were granted clemency. This is the largest number of clemency ever given under any government. Additionally, the Prerogative of Mercy Committee is preparing to meet in a month's time to consider the application of another 200 applicants. This is what a caring government does, Mr. Speaker. When we came into office, the population at the prison was, I think, 1,600 plus. I believe the latest numbers now reflect that it's down to about 1,200, or just a little over 1,200. Mr. Speaker, our government's approach is simple as it relates to legislative implementation. We're of the view that while laws are made to punish those in violation of society's norms, for the most part, it should also take into consideration that with proper intervention and oversight, persons capable of redeeming themselves do deserve a second chance. Mr. Speaker, this Minnis-led government believes in second chances. We don't only talk about it. We don't only talk about it. We only say what you're doing to that one. But when you were here, what did you do? We're showing it. Mr. Speaker, let's look at number 3, technological advances. We got so much here to do. Mr. Speaker, it is no secret that before coming into office, this Minnis-led administration in its manifesto touted the role of technology and its efforts to bring down the high levels of crime in our country. To date, our government would have invested in excess of $44 million in technology for our law enforcement agencies, with another $6 million in contracts scheduled for this upcoming fiscal period. Mr. Speaker, there was an estimated, for the Royal Bahamas Police Force, a $23 million investment in technology for our Bahamas Police Force that aided in intelligence gathering, crime prevention, crime reduction, and prosecution. The number is expected to grow during this fiscal period, and some of the technology includes the real-time crime center, world-class, additional CCTV cameras, shot spotter, Marcos Alert, body-worn and dash cam, Motorola contracts for improvements to the real-time crime center, electronic monitoring, COVID-19 monitoring, etc. Let's look at the real-time crime center, Mr. Speaker. The real-time crime center was officially opened in February of 2021 by our leader, the member for Kalani. The center is responsible for centralizing police technologies to facilitate a more efficient and effective administration and operational system. Specifically, the center's theme streamlines all technologies into a centralized monitoring base. Footage is live and recorded for ease of access to assist with police investigations. And during the upcoming fiscal period, our ministry will invest another $105,493 in a Motorola integration system for the center. So we are about ready, and I'm so sorry, Mr. Speaker, that we don't have the benefit of this, but we're now doing a live demo on TV that speaks to, and I remembered Exuma would have had some questions around the drones. But this demo is showing a drone leaving its nest, responding to a gunshot. And everything is automated. And so the gunshot goes on, the shot sort of sends the message to the drone. And this is happening as I speak on TV. So if you're watching ZNet, you are now seeing what this government is doing. We are transforming our law enforcement agencies into world-class centers. That is happening now as we speak. Are we done? We're done. Still happening? Still happening now? It's happening as we speak, and so I don't want to talk. It's supposed to take a minute and about 20 seconds. On the big screen. You can watch it tonight on TV. Almost done? All right. And so, Mr. Speaker, this is just a demonstration that this government did just not, we didn't go out and just say we wanted to buy stuff for buying its sake. There was a method, an objective behind the acquisition of technology for our law enforcement agencies. And so they're still playing that, and I think we're nearing the end now. This is still on. And so some of my colleagues are watching. If you have a phone and you have ZNet app, okay, all right. So that's it now. And so time is running, but you see all of these stuff at the bottom. It'll give you the coordinates as to where these shot are. But yeah, absolutely. So it's just a demonstration, Mr. Speaker. But let me continue. I know in the interest of time. So, Mr. Speaker, since coming into office, our administration has embarked on a project to outfit the Bahamas with state-of-the-art technology to assist the Royal Bahamas Police Force with detecting and preventing crime. Curbing gun violence is one of the most prevalent crimes and is of significant concern to all of us. That is why this Hubert Minnis-led government invested $1.9 million in the purchase of ShotSpotter technology. And that technology is paying significant dividends throughout our country. Mr. Speaker, there have been some 252,562 gunshot incidents, including 1,523 multiple, 690 single, and 349 probable shots. Robinson Road and East Street have the first and second highest repeated locations, while Fridays, weekends, through Sundays were the most active days between 7 p.m. and 4 a.m. were the most active times. And due to the success of ShotSpotter, Mr. Speaker, as the request of the Royal Bahamas Police Force, they are seeking to add additional, to add to this technology. Mr. Speaker, Marco's Alert system was important to our government as it involved the protection of children. Our government invested over $3 million to forge a collective partnership and alliance between corporate Bahamas, the police, and civil society. The technology is primarily designed to assist in the safe return of abducted children. Mr. Speaker, in 2021, our government invested some $1.9 million for the software to aid in public alert warning system using billboards strategically placed in major thoroughfares. This resulted when our government was made aware that two of the mobile providers in the country did not possess the technology, namely the Cell Broadcast Entity and the Cell Broadcast Center. We made the decision as a cabinet to make the investment. And so the public warning alert system, Marcos Alert, will enable police to send out broadcasts and Marcos Alert throughout the commercial radios, television station broadcasts, teletext, communication, electronic network systems, and billboards. Further, in the event that there is a threat to the public or weather alert, the system administrator can create a geofence. All right, so if you have an incident on any of our island and it's confined to that island, you can essentially geofence that island and send information to every cell phone on that island instantaneously. And so this system will serve certainly NEMA well, because now it will allow for public broadcast at a moment's notice anywhere throughout this country. Mr. Speaker, body and dash cams, a wave of criticism regarding police-citizens interaction in the United States continue to raise concerns with the police interaction with members of the public in other jurisdictions. Of course, the Bahamas is not immune to the same concerns regarding police-public interaction. Globally, more and more police agencies are equipping frontline officers with body-worn cameras, which allows for street-level view of an on-duty police officer at work. Mr. Speaker, to support this technology in February 2021, our government made an incremental payment of some $688,561 for the acquisition of 200 body-worn and 200 dash cameras. At present, a total of 120 body-worn cameras are being used by frontline officers. In addition, a total of 20 police vehicles have been outfitted with dash cams. In the upcoming fiscal period, our government will invest another $394,357 for the upgrade and maintenance. Mr. Speaker, electronic monitoring. The current system for electronic monitoring expire during December of 2020, and that's the contract. A decision was made to retain the current vendor on a month-to-month basis until a new contract was issued. I can report that after an exhaustive process, the Cabinet of the Bahamas has agreed to award a new contract in the amount of $2.5 million to a vendor to be named shortly. Mr. Speaker, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. There was an estimated $20 million investment in technologies for the Royal Bahamas Defense Force that aided in intelligence gathering, maritime domain awareness, and search and rescue. These technology includes drones, which is a part of a multi-agency network, bridge simulator, and an AV integration system. Mr. Speaker, the Defense Force will acquire several drones, including a quadcopter capable of vertical takeoff and landing. Due to its size, the drones can be transported in law enforcement vehicles and deployed in less than 5 minutes. It has the capability to be launched from the Royal Bahamas Defense Force ship and used for vessels boarding, search and seizure operations, and for search and rescue operation at land or at sea. Meanwhile, the Deep Trekker is an underwater drone with an 8 hours endurance time. It will be used as a remote operated vehicle to inspect all cruise and cargo ships for contraband entering the port of Nassau and other ports of entry throughout the country. It will be used to search for lost items at depths of up to 645 feet. Long-range drones will also be used for special patrols and surveillance of unrestricted airspace in the areas of New Providence. The police force will be also using long-range drones on a daily basis. Mr. Speaker, the bridge simulator was acquired at a cost of some $1.6 million and was commissioned during the early 2020. It is a tool that provides professional development training for command and operation of Diamond-class vessels and 2 Bahamian-class vessels. This very valuable piece of equipment has trained an estimated 35 officers to date and safely increases the operational skill of officers and Marines in these vessels. We expect this number to grow and translate into better operations and management of the Royal Bahamas Defense Forces fleet. Mr. Speaker, the audio-visual integration system for the RBDF. On 27 May 2021, $998,000 contract was signed between the RBDF and Multimedia Technologies for the acquisition of an audio-visual integration system. This system will further enhance the situational and maritime domain awareness of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force by providing live audio and video feed from remote locations to the RBDF command centers. Additionally, the system will allow for interconnectivity between law enforcement agencies. This system will be installed at the HMBS Coral Harbor, Gunpoint, Ragged Island, and Matthew Town, Inagua. Mr. Speaker, it has often been said, and this is the Bahamas Department of Correction, it has often been said that the Bahamas Department of Corrections is often overlooked. That was one time ago. We're changing that. As Minister with responsibility for BDOCs, I can say without fear of contradiction that our government has made and continues to make significant investment in the Department of Corrections. Only recently, Cabinet has approved a CCTV contract in the amount of $410,000 for the acquisition of 100 cameras to be installed in key areas throughout the facilities. These high-quality cameras will be outfitted with license plate recognition, facial recognition software. Additionally, the contract will provide for design built out of the network and infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to capital acquisition. Since coming into office, and this is the Royal Bahamas Police Force, in 2017, our government immediately undertook a comprehensive assessment of the Royal Bahamas Police Force's fleet and discovered that the agency was in desperate need of transportation. As a result, the government undertook to bolster the Royal Bahamas Police Force fleet by investing on the onset some $5.9 million for the acquisition of vehicles. In continuing with its commitment to the Royal Bahamas Police Force, the government has allocated some $801,000 for additional vehicles to complement the existing fleet. Mr. Speaker, our government will invest an additional $80,000 for the purchase of 8 pre-trained drug and firearm detection dogs to complement the K-9 unit of the Royal Bahamas Police Force. The dogs are expected to arrive in country within 2 weeks and will include 4 pre-trained dogs trained in drug and firearm detections, 3 dual-purpose dogs. Of the total, 2 will be assigned to Grand Bahama to assist in the duties there. Mr. Speaker, police station, the island of Andros is being developed at a rapid pace. In fact, airport in Fresh Creek is now receiving more and more international flights daily. A number of new bridges have been opened in Stafford and Stanyard Key, and the developments, including new villas, Kamalami Key, all necessitate a higher number of police officers in Andros to complement the development. Hence, renovations have been completed to the police station in South Andros to do just that. Mr. Speaker, renovations also occurred in Bimini at the police station, has been renovated with the installation of computers, air conditioning, and washroom, upgrades to the amenities there. Additionally, thank you, Member West End. Additionally, police stations were renovated on the islands of Inagua, Maguana, Auckland, and Long Island. We, Mr. Speaker, are also exploring the possibility of acquiring 5 pre-owned fire engines. And these are small engines which we plan to deploy on Cat Island, Auckland, Crooked Island, Maguana, and Long Island. You like that? A new police station on Ragged Island has also, it's in the making. Mr. Speaker, in the upcoming fiscal period, the Paradise Island Police Station will be undergoing extensive renovation in line with a new project on that island. The Tourism Welcome Center building in downtown Nassau was acquired by the police force, and renovations will be initiated to erect new police station near the new cruise port. Renovations of police headquarters will be ongoing, including upgrades to the firehouse and police headquarters, some which are in bad shape. In the upcoming budget period, Mr. Speaker, we're exploring the possibility of establishing stations and using facilities on Cat Island, San Salvador, Long Island, and a Great Harbor Key. Mr. Speaker, I turn to the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. Since 2017, our government has invested some $25 million in capital development and acquisitions of capital assets. These allocations have resulted in substantial upgrades to the RBDF facilities and modernization of their equipment, as well as a number of capital assets. Let's look at the electrification of the Coral Harbor base. Significant progress was made in the electrification of the base at Coral Harbor. The project was approved by the cabinet at a cost of some $3,515,497. From the overall cost, the Bahamas Power and Light has been awarded a $692,097 to complete upgrades to the underground infrastructure, right, to be able to accommodate the vessel, something that has been long overdue. Mr. Speaker, renovation at Coral Harbor, a contract has also been awarded for the renovation to the ground floor at the Nordgate building at a cost of some $280,000. Mr. Speaker, the renovations at Matthewtown, the decentralization of the Defense Forces operations continue with the completion of the renovations to the galley and the gym at the HMBS Matthewtown Inagua, and the installation of the electrical supply at the Maritime Center in Matthewtown. The installation of the electrical supply at the Maritime Center will provide the necessary shore power supply for the RBDF vessels when berthed alongside the dock, and will reduce the cost of fuel as well as the wear and tear on these vessels. Mr. Speaker, to support the same, $74,790 has been invested to upgrade the electrical supply at the base in Matthewtown, Inagua, inclusive of perimeter lighting. The contract was awarded to Blue Waters, a local company out of New Providence. The initial down payment was made on the 5th of May, 2021. Mr. Speaker, another very important investment is the construction of fuel facilities in Matthewtown, Inagua. Further, Sun Oil Limited has been awarded the contract for the installation of fuel facilities on Matthewtown, Inagua, and Gunpoint, Ragged Island. The installation cost for the fuel facility at Matthew Town, Inagua, and Gunpoint Ragged Island is budgeted at $607,077. Mr. Speaker, this is very important, and you would have heard me speak to this before. That prior to this, vessels working in the southern Bahamas had to come to Nassau to be refueled. All right? So you can imagine the loss in time, all right, the breakdown of that wall in the southern Bahamas, money, and as I said, the wear and tear on these vessels. And so this is our government's not attempt. These are the steps that we're taking to decentralize. And these efforts will aid in the reduction of human trafficking, migrant smuggling, drug trafficking, poaching in our waters. All right? And so we are decentralizing in a real way. Mr. Speaker, Gunpoint Ragged Island contract, the contract value and some $55,000 has been awarded to TPS Construction. It should be noted that both projects are essential for the decentralization initiative. Mr. Speaker, dry docking and the refit of Lawrence Major Auxiliary Machinery commenced in Suriname. As we know, we had the accident there as that boat was moored undergoing repairs in Suriname by Damen. We had an unfortunate accident where another vessel traversing damaged the Lawrence Major at a cost of over $1 million. I'm pleased to say that steps are being taken now to rectify that problem. Mr. Speaker, I turn now to BDOCs. Since taking office, our government has tackled some of the most pressing issues at BDOC, consisting of upgrades to deteriorating infrastructure and the replacement of archaic security systems, which are essential to the upkeep of the facility. Mr. Speaker, during the fiscal period, BDOCs was successful in securing some $4.6 million for various capital expenditure. To date, upgrades to modernization to the southern wing and the maximum security facility have been completed, and works have now commenced in the western wing as 2 blocks are currently undergoing renovations. So you can see, Mr. Speaker, that, we are taking steps to improve the quality of life for our officers down at the Department of Corrections, as well as the inmates who reside there. The renovations that are occurring now are long overdue. As a matter of fact, they're decades overdue. While we are currently looking at and exploring the possibility of a modern correctional facility to accommodate the transformation currently taking place at the prison. And our ministry now is looking at possibly at some point we have a committee looking at a public-private partnership with the view of making a proposal to cabinet. And so we will see exactly where that goes. That committee reports back to me shortly. But we cannot talk about rehabilitation and transformation when persons are having to live in squalor and work in squalor. Can't happen. And so our government recognized that that has to change. So these all have to work hand in hand. Mr. Speaker, I now move to human capital and recruitment. And in the 21st century, professional development has been critical for all categories of work. The same is true for security forces. However, when decisions have to be made in a split second, training is even more important. Simultaneously, security forces have evolved from just on-the-job training as academia and science methodologies have now been infused into the sector. Mr. Speaker, during between 2012 and 2016, a total of 1,077 serving police officers completed in-service training. During this current period, between 2017 and 2021, a total of 1,725 serving officers have completed in-service training for various topics. This represents an increase of some 60% increase in training. So this speaks to our government's commitment to the development of our officers. And so hence the significant increase in training when you compare the periods. Mr. Speaker, in March of this year, our government signed an intent to collaborate agreement with the University of the Bahamas to augment leadership training for senior, mid-level, and senior police officers. On March 6, 2019, a cohort of 16 completed first segment of training at the University of the Bahamas. On May 17, that cohort, including 5 police officers, 6 correctional officers, completed training at a ceremony at Georgia State University in Atlanta, Georgia. Mr. Speaker, our government is committed to providing necessary support to assist the Royal Bahamas Police Force in its ongoing development of its officers, including reserves and civilian staff. Since coming to office, a total of 406 officers have completed training and are now performing duties. We are also able to assist the Royal Bahamas or the Royal Turks and Caicos Police Force with 19 recruits at the Grand Bahama Police Training Center. Mr. Speaker, the force, 19 of the recruits from the Grand Bahama Police Training College, alongside Bahamian recruits from last year. In next fiscal period, we expect to recruit an additional 100 police recruits. That will bring the overall number of new police recruits during the period to 506, compared to 413 persons recruited during 2012 to 2016. So you see, Mr. Speaker, despite the challenges with Dorian and COVID, we have still been able to increase our recruitment. All right, and so we have been able to recruit between 2017 to 2000 to present. All right, as compared to the last period, 23%. There's a 23% increase. Mr. Speaker, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, to date, 132 persons participated in training. We saw that there. And during this upcoming budget cycle, Mr. Speaker, the Defense Force will continue to transform with major capital projects. A 3-year contract, and this is very important, Mr. Speaker, a 3-year contract with Daman at a cost of some $5.610 million was signed on the 27th of May, 2021. The scope of that work has several components, inclusive of spare parts, and more importantly, a training program that will provide extensive training for the Defense Force's technical teams that will build capacity. This will ensure that its personnel will be equipped with the necessary skills for the maintenance and service of the vessels. Now, Mr. Speaker, this certainly is near and dear to me. because I could not understand that if you were going to invest close to $300 million into something, that one of the first things you're going to do is say, how do we maintain? Who do we get to maintain? And so this government has taken the position that we want to invest in our people. Okay. And I said, Mr. Speaker, to the Diamond representative during the signing of this contract, you may be a decent company, but we don't need you to come from Europe here just to screw in a light bulb on a vessel. We have officers and Marines smart enough to do that and more, and capable enough to do that and more. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a problem that ought to have been addressed from the initial acquisition, prior to the initial acquisition and retrofitting of these vessels. All right? Because when we came in, there were no engineers to do the work. Right? But I'm happy to say this $5+ million contract will set us on the right path. All right? And it will develop our officers and transfer that knowledge. We don't want you for life, Diamond. Okay? We want to transfer that knowledge to our men and women so that one day we will be signing that contract with them. And that was clearly articulated. Mr. Speaker, June 2012 to 2016, a total of some 200 persons were recruited in the RBDF, while a total of 269 persons, that's plus the 65 that's coming in this fiscal period, were recruited under this government for the 4 years of 2017 to 2020. This represents, Mr. Speaker, a 69% increase in recruitment. This shows the commitment of our government again, that despite COVID, despite Dory, that recruitment has outpaced recruitment for the previous period by some 69%. Mr. Speaker, our training at BDOCS is crucial, and again, we continue to be committed to our officers at the Bahamas Department of Correction. And on the 17th of May 2021, Mr. Speaker, a total of 30 inmates that started the BTVI training program via virtual learning at the Correctional Training Institute. To date, commendably, BDOCS is getting closer to achieving its professional development training of some 600 inmates, as 466 or 77% have already completed this BTVI training. So we're preparing them for life after prison. To expand on this professional development, the department is in the process of affording training opportunities to inmates housed in the maximum security facility. Mr. Speaker, we continue to recruit officers at the Bahamas Department of Correction. We just had a squad, I believe, of 60 passed out last year, and provisions have been made in this upcoming budget for an additional squad. And so this demonstrates these kinds of recruitment we haven't seen, and certainly not in the Department of Correction in a long time. Mr. Speaker, let me turn to the Parliamentary Registration Department, and I think this is an important as we now are approaching the election period. You would have recalled that previously, to prepare the general election, the Parliamentary Commissioner had to prepare a new voters register every 5 years. However, with the passage of the Parliamentary Elections Act 2020, the legal requirement for a 5-year register was repealed, and the new permanent register came into force. Since the 2017 register is the core or the permanent register, this eliminates the needs for the mass registration of voters as in the past. Boy, people love this. They love this. This has allowed the Parliamentary Registration Department, Mr. Speaker, to adhere to the social distancing requirements while still conducting voters' registration exercises for a limited number of Bahamians seeking registrations or transfers. Mr. Speaker, despite the current health crisis, the Parliamentary Registration Department continues to work assiduously to deliver on its obligation to prepare credible voters registration and plan for the administration of a free and fair election. In this regard, voters registrations continues throughout the islands of the Bahamas. The current voters register, as of the 25th of May 2021, Mr. Speaker, has 190,157 voters, which with a breakdown as follows. Family Islands, 28,002, Grand Bahama, 30,412, and New Providence, 131,743. Brings that total to 190,157. Let me make this clear to all within the sound of my voice. Simply put, if you registered in 2017 and have not moved, you don't need to register again. See what this government has done for you? Number two, if you registered in 2017 and have changed constituency or polling division, but has not been 90 days, it has not been 90 days or more, you don't need to register again. Let me repeat that. If you registered in 2017 and have changed constituency or polling division, but it has not been 90 days or more, you do not need to register again. Only qualified Bahamians who are not on the 2017 voters register or who have moved to an address different from the one on their current or purple voters card need to visit the Parliamentary Registration Center to register or transfer their registration to a new polling division and constituency where they now reside. Mr. Speaker, to reiterate, the targeted group are inclusive of new registrants, and this refers to eligible persons who are 18 years of age and above and not on the current register. B, this refers to persons already registered on the voters list, but who have moved from one place of occupancy to another for a period of 90 days or more, and legal name changes. Mr. Speaker, I wish to use this opportunity to highlight details relative to expanded voters registration exercise, which has been ongoing. Registration since 2017 has been ongoing when permitted with strict adherence to health and safety protocols. The registration centers include Parliamentary Registration Department, Head Office on Farrington Road, the Parliamentary Registration Department Sub-Office in Freeport, Grand Bahama, Family Islands Administrators Offices. Registration at the aforementioned occurred during regular hours between 9 and 5, Monday through Friday. Phase 2. Beginning on Monday, 15th of February 2021, Phase 2 commenced with strict health and safety protocols, ongoing registration to complement the main voters registration consists of New Providence with 7 centers that are open and continue to be operational to date. 1, Town Center Mall Post Office. 2, Grantstown Community Center, Kwaku Street. 3, South Beach Post Office. 4, Elizabeth Estates Post Office. 5, Carmichael Road Post Office. 6, Cable Beach Post Office. 7, Parliamentary Registration Department. You hear that, Pine Ridge? On Grand Bahama, the following registration centers remain operational including, Pine Ridge, you may want to add this one, St. Nicholas Anglican Church Hall, St. Mary's Magdalene Anglican Church Hall, St. Stephen's Anglican Church Hall, Masonic Lodge Hall, Lucaya Lodge Temple Association, New Canaan Zion Baptist Church Hall, Church of God of Prophecy, Hawksville, Church of Christ Apostolic Church, the Government Complex, McLeanstown, and this other one is the PRD Sub-Office, Mall Drive. Family Islands Administrators Offices continues registration at the usual time, 9 a.m. to 5 a.m. Monday through Friday. Mr. Speaker, beginning in March 2021, Phase 3 commenced with health and safety protocols in effect. All right. We activated to complement the main and sub-voters registration exercise sites on New Providence. The following locations served as pop-up sites. Number 1, Gambia Primary School. Number 2, Adelaide Primary School. Number 3, Sandlands Primary School. Number 4, Camp Road Primary School. Number 5, Church of Christ, Yellow Elder. Number 6, various workplaces of both private and public entities. So we're reaching out to everybody, Mr. Speaker. On Grand Bahama, the following locations served as pop-up: West End, St. Mary Magdalene Anglican Church, High Rock, East Grand Bahama, and the Government Complex at McCranestown, West End. To ensure the accuracy of the permanent register, the Parliamentary Registration Department works continues as follows. 1, engage in continuous editing of the permanent voters registration list. 2, the permanent register will be continuously purged of deceased voters. 3, new registrants will be added daily. 4, transfers will be processed daily. 5, incarcerated persons' voting rights will be suspended. Mr. Speaker, I wish to inform members that on the weekend of the 29th of May 2021, the Parliamentary Registration Department commenced enumeration of scrutineering exercises in parts of St. Anne's constituency and Freetown constituency on the island of New Providence, and the East Grand Bahama constituency, Grand Bahama. Over the coming weeks, the department will expand its scrutineering exercises in other constituencies with particular emphasis on constituency boundary lines where discrepancy have been noted during the in-house registry. So in other words, Mr. Speaker, we will ensure that there is no hanky-panky. Mr. Speaker, the public will be informed in advance via public service announcements of the constituencies where scrutineers will be conducting their surveys. And they will all be informed, and with the high visible ID badges. We don't sneak it. They all be informed. You know where they are, checking on you. All right, so if you don't live somewhere, don't register there. Oh no, there. The public is advised that under no circumstances will the scrutineer need to enter the house or any residence. However, the voter will be requested to sign an interview form and be given a copy of the same. I invite the public to cooperate with scrutineers in the performance of their duty. These are very important people around this time. Mr. Speaker, now that we have a permanent register, enumeration exercises will be a critical tool that the Parliamentary Registration Department will utilize as part of its work to maintain a credible register. While the majority of citizens do not relocate once they have purchased a home, there is still a significant number that live in apartments and relocate from time to time. Furthermore, as aspiring Bahamians move out of their homesteads and start their own family, or just to live on their own, they too may need to transfer their registration. The scrutineering exercise will allow the department to come across these individuals and invite such persons to visit a voter's registration center to transfer their registration to their new address. Transparency and accountability are the key to the electoral process. In keeping with the theme, the department wishes to establish an open dialogue with the public in an effort to provide every opportunity for the public to access registration sites and have their questions or concerns addressed. The Parliamentary Registration Department will provide information via several media platforms, including one, the respective leading newspapers in the nation, two, radio and television public service announcements, three, press conferences, four, billboards, five, websites at www.elections.gov.bs. They can also be accessed through a social media account inclusive of Facebook, the Parliamentary Registration Department. Mr. Speaker, the current staff complement of the department is woefully inadequate to properly perform these duties. The Parliamentary Registration Commissioner has therefore prepared a revised organizational structure, and these are the discussions myself and our leader would have had, because we feel that there is a need to transform this department. For far too long, it has been neglected, and this government has come to realize that. And so as we modernize, we recognize that we must transform. In preparation for the 2022 election, the Parliamentary Registration Department has been allocated some $4.7 million for the upcoming budget. This reflects an increase, as I said before, of some $3.187 million. Mr. Speaker, taking care of our own, my ministry fully understands that our law enforcement personnel endure stressful work environment. Consequently, personal matters, if left unresolved, can impede productivity. The goal of this administration is to tackle our law enforcement concerns head on, not deny or defer. For me, this is personal, because I too was once a law enforcement officer. In addition, the exemplary performances over the last 15 months during the worst crisis in our nation's history means we owe them a debt of gratitude. In the next fiscal period, so we owe them a debt. In the next fiscal period, we intend to continue to reform law enforcement career paths, to facilitate promotions with increments, and to bring parity amongst law enforcement agencies. Mr. Speaker, allow me to say this to the men and women of law enforcement who fall under my remit. Our government continues to recognize your work, especially during these times of crisis. Because of this, your caring government has taken steps to ensure that you are rewarded for your contributions to the safety and security of this nation. Funding has been made available during the upcoming fiscal period in all of your budgets. Hear that, BDOC? To the men and women in BDOC, this minister-led administration, don't listen to them people talking nonsense. This minister-led administration has not forgotten you. Your promotions are secured. As a matter of fact, steps are being undertaken by the Department of Public Service in consultation with the Ministry of National Security to adjust your career path. And me and the minister spoke to this. At present, it's easier for someone to be promoted in the police and the defense force compared to the prison. So we're working to bring some parity to that. And so we're not just talking it, we're demonstrating it. And that will allow for more deserving persons to be elevated, all right? And to you, the men and women of BDOC, when your promotion comes very shortly, that it will be retroactive. Mr. Speaker, I want to say this as well, and to the as we're talking promotion and that we are taking care of people. You know, there is a situation 11. Oh, I still have another 100 pages. But there's as it relates, and I want to have this conversation with the hard-working staff at the police, civilian staff at the police forensic laboratory. For almost 2 decades now, these hard-working professionals with bachelor's and master's degrees, these are the scientists, all right? These are the serologists, these are the forensic scientists, very professional individuals, many of who I know personally. For almost a decade, they have been fighting for a career path. So many of them have been working month to month, couldn't go to the bank to get a loan, to get a home or to get a car. For almost 2 decades, they have been doing it, okay? And they've been shouting at the top of their voice, screaming. But it had to take this minister-led government to hear their cry. And Mr. Speaker, I stand before you today in an emotional way to tell those civilian staff that their cries have been heard. And we have now created, due to the hard work of our team at the Ministry of National Security and the team at the Department of Public Service, that we have now created a career path for those hard-working, and most of them, if not all of them, are women, mothers, for them. And so now they can see their way through. They will be able now to go and get that loan. What a caring government. What a caring government. Mr. Speaker, I'd be remiss if I failed to acknowledge the work currently being done under this program of the National Neighborhood Watch Council and what they continue to do. We have more than 130, I believe, 8 groups throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and these are civilians who work for nothing throughout this Bahamas, who continue, led by its chairman, Mr. Keno Wong, who continue to work unselfishly to make a difference in their respective communities. And they travel sometimes on their own funds throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas to help other communities, places like Exoma and Eleuthera and Grand Bahama and other places form these groups. These groups now are having a real effect. When we see that housebreaking, for example, during our term in office has decreased for almost 2/3, it is speaking to the contribution and the work being done by these groups. Another group as well, our Citizen Security and Justice Program, has been a very key and integral, has been playing a very integral role in setting in place programs and getting many of our young persons in BDBI and College of the Bahamas and improving their skills. That's another key arm of our ministry. And I want to say a thank you to Dr. Allen, who leads our Crime Council, which is a very diverse group of persons. And much of the work that they continue to do go unnoticed, but they're having profound impact in many of the at-risk communities throughout this country. These are the work that they're doing are part of a long-term effort to really bring some relief to our communities and get our nation back on the right track. Mr. Speaker, let me say too, that we have been leaders in trafficking in persons in this region. Despite the lockdown, Superintendent Newbold and her team have been leading regional conferences throughout this region. And the Bahamas is one of the global leaders, really, that we continue to maintain our Tier 1 status. And we're demonstrating that in the work that we're doing, because as we know, the trafficking in persons is a multi-billion-dollar business, second only to that of drug trafficking. And we have been doing a tremendous job and kind of keeping that at the forefront in our nation. So, Mr. Speaker, there's certainly so much more to cover, but in the interest of time, I would like to bring my contribution to this 2021-2022 budget to an end. And I would just like to close, Mr. Speaker, by thanking my permanent secretary, Acting Michelle Dowell, and her staff there at the Ministry of National Security, Dr. Bethel and her team, who have been doing a tremendous job. You know, they'll work around the clock if they have to get the job done. And that certainly is being reflected in the outcomes. The Commissioner of Police, the police reservists, and I want to say to the police reservists that monies have been budgeted for your promotion, and you will be rewarded. You work hard. We want to do some other things for you as well. You work hard, and you deserve the reward, and it's coming. And to the civilian staff of these agencies, and to Commodore King, I want to thank too Captain Dotson for the work that he does, but to Commodore King and his staff, his officers, his executive staff, and his Marines. The Marines, you know, I just happened to occupy a building with Commodore King, and I get to see many of his Marines on a daily basis. And I am often impressed by the turnout of those officers and their commitment to service. And so to Commodore King and his officers, to Director Ferguson, and he's just working on a lot of the foundational issues now as it relates to the National Crime Intelligence Agencies, getting the regulations together, putting in place all of the policies, because we want to do this right. That will guide this very, very important agency as we move into the future. And of course, to the acting parliamentary commissioner, Mr. Duncanson, our consultants and their team down there at the Parliamentary Registration Department. That's a professional group of individuals. And I have every confidence that whenever Member for Kalani rings the bell, the acting parliamentary commissioner and his team will be ready because they continue to do an exceptional job. And so I would like to, again, thank the men and women in uniform for their courageous and valiant effort during this most struggling, most difficult period. And they're often called upon to perform without any thought of what their mandate includes. They're always there. So our nation is better off because of what you do each day to keep us all safe. We are indebted to you and your family. So may God bless you all. May God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Better things are ahead for you. You have no worries. You can get out.
you very much, Honorable Member. As many? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It really is a privilege to stand here today to make my contribution for the 2021-2022 budget debate. You know, Mr. Speaker, the world is a very different place now because wondrous and strange things are happening. I can say that because in 2020, during the pandemic, I became a father again. I didn't do that by myself. And it could not have been possible without my wife, Larica Alexis, who has been my biggest confidant, my biggest supporter, my most astute critic, and somebody, you know, who we have gone on a very interesting journey, certainly over the last 4 years. You know, but while eternally grateful for twin blessings, let me say today that my career in that business, which spans some 30 years, 1991 when my first child was born, to 2020, my career is now over in that business. So Adrian, Brandon, Nicholas, Mila, Amadeus, Lauren, and Elijah, that's it. That's the crew, okay? My focus will be, has been, and will continue to be the support and nurturing of my children and my family, and working to help all of this nation's youngsters, and not so young, to lead healthy, productive lives. I started my contribution this way because the differing realities of my eldest children and my youngest reflect their life's journeys, the successes and challenges of their family, but it also speaks to the times in which they were born. What was true when Adrian, who is now a PhD mathematician, was born in 1991, is no longer the case when the two littlest ones, and I don't know what they will do, when they entered the world amidst a COVID-19 pandemic. In the early 90s, I was just about to start the last phase of my training as a cardiovascular and thoracic surgeon. And I was anxious to come home to take my place in the redevelopment of this country called the Bahamas. Now, in 2021, I am one of the senior surgeons in this country, looking on and assessing the landscape and realizing that there's much work left to be done. None of my kids got to choose the circumstances of their birth, how they chose, how they entered, the date of their entry, or the circumstances into which they were born, good or bad. So today, Mr. Speaker, I shall spend extraordinarily little time on partisan politics. Who did what? Who did it when? Except to state some irrefutable and illustrative facts, of course. You see, I sincerely believe that in its current form practiced, it adds little to the growth and development of our nation, and oftentimes prevents us from addressing the critical issues facing our beloved Bahamas. In its purest form, politics is the art of the possible. That's Otto von Bismarck. Combat for compromise. A better understanding would be Mao Zedong's statement that politics is war without bloodshed, while war is politics with bloodshed. You see, partisan tribalism or positions taken simply for the sport of politics has caused us to lose much. There are many issues on which we would agree or could agree, or we could compromise, but we dare not, for fear of ceding that captured ground, which is itself as fleeting as sandcastles built upon the sand between the high and low water mark on a stormy day. We have collectively created this mess, sometimes by acts of what we have done, acts of commission, or what we haven't gotten around to, acts of omission. And yet my journey, as complex as it has been, as politically eventful as my past since the by-election in 2010, you can all recall the 2 days of recounts and weeks of election courts. Despite that journey, there is but one political organization to which I am aligned. For better or worse, through good times and bad, I have been, I am, and for the foreseeable future, I will remain an FNM. You see, the Free National Movement, as imperfect as it is, remains, in my view, the party best equipped to steer this nation through the stormy seas ahead. So today, I hope to speak directly about my view of this nation that I love dearly, and to examine critically whether we, all 39 of us, have been effective stewards, and the people that predated us, some of them on the wall, have been effective stewards of this nation of islands. I will also offer recommendations informed by my personal observations, research, and the kind guidance offered by a number of patriotic Bahamians, some of whom I will name, others who will remain anonymous. I cannot speak without talking about Elizabeth. 12 years ago, I started a relationship with the people of Elizabeth. 4 years ago, they entrusted me to represent them, to be their voice. And in this place and outside, I have attempted to ensure that they have always been heard. It is only because of the support and the confidence of the men and women of Elizabeth that I've had the privilege of serving in this place and that other place. I am grateful, Mr. Speaker, and I try every day to do the best for them that I can. I enjoy the support of an incredible executive team. Let me single out only one, and that is my chair, the best chair in this country, Mrs. Pamela Hart. We are Elizabeth strong, and we intend to remain that way. Let me just tell you what we have accomplished briefly over the last 4 years. We provided almost 7,000 meals, clothing, and hygiene care packages for Hurricane Dorian victims. We had BJC and BGCSE after-school classes before the pandemic prevented them from happening. We have given out because the dignity of not being hungry is so important. We have provided some 19,000 bags of groceries and 2,500 $50 food vouchers. The bags of groceries include rice, sardines, tuna, grits, cream, soup, noodles, spaghetti, flour, sugar, water, and occasionally fruits. We have provided maintenance and repairs to many of the community parks. We've done mosquito fogging, rat and rodent control, hurricane tree trimming, and I could go on and on. Mr. Speaker, it is so important to make sure that your representation counts to the people who have put you in that place. And I have tried my best, certainly over the last 4 years. And who knows whether the people of Elizabeth will give me their support once again. But I am grateful that they have in 2017. Now let me get to the substantive matter. We are here to debate a compendium of bills which collectively make up the annual budget of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Now, Elizabeth looks at this budget as truly a critical point in our nation's finance. This budget, more than any other in the history of the Bahamas, must signal that we have reached a point, not a crossroad, but a T-junction. For those of you who are familiar with the movie The Matrix, you may recall when Morpheus holds out his hand and tells Neo, to take the blue pill or the red pill. We must either now turn left or turn right. But we cannot stay in the position that we're in. At this point, we must now pivot and recognize that government cannot be the engine for sustained growth. It can and must supply the lubrication, but it is ill-equipped to drive. We must now embrace the private sector and embrace and believe in the industry and creativity of our people. This budget, this time, must be the last time. This is a never again scenario. And we must use this year as a springboard to the future. We must facilitate the retooling and rebuilding or capacity building to allow the Bahamas to survive. And we must accept that we have outlived the utility of many of the models that we embraced for decades. Now I'm going to build the case, if I may, Mr. Speaker, and comment a little bit on general expenditure over the last 30 years. A review of the balance sheet of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas over the last 30 years, actually the last 40 plus years, tells a sad story. I have benefited from a validated, verified, thorough review of annual Bahamas government expenditure, revenue, deficits, and GDP provided to me by Mr. Rick Lowe, who painstakingly fact-checked our fiscal performance over the last 50 years using central bank data, and a review by Alvin Rabushka entitled The Monetary History of the Bahamas. It has been shared on social media widely, but I'm happy to table it today. The numbers tell a story of a proud but financially challenged nation with disappointments, setbacks, and the impacts of external forces. And because budgets are about choices, the fiscal impact of our choices year in and year out. Let's go all the way back, Mr. Speaker, to the first budget in an independent Bahamas, 1974. In that year, the revenue was 115 million, and the expenditure was 155 million. The national debt in 1974 was $108 million. It is now 9,665 million. This is not a sustainable scenario. We have now reached, and I know what I'm going to say now will be deemed as alarmist, but we have now reached perilously close to the fiscal cliff. And that is not a political statement. Jamaica and Barbados have already fallen. Every year since 1974, successive Bahamian governments have spent more than they collected. Every single year. The national debt, which was $108 million in 1974, doubled in 1977 to 218 million. It doubled again in 1982 to 443.6 million. Double again in 1990, 924 million. By 1999, it was 1.9 billion. By 2009, it was 3.9 billion. And in 2017, $7.884 billion. For those of you who want to know what happened under who, the total addition to the debt between 1974 and 2017, total addition to the debt under the FNM was 3.1 billion, actually $3,120,000,000. The total addition to the debt under PLP administrations during that time was $4,655,000,000. Now, raw numbers are very difficult to compare year to year or decade to decade because the buying power of $1 in 1974 would require $5.64 in 2021. So let us try and make this simpler for everybody to understand. And let's look at percentages. Now, I like the parable of talents. I've told it here before. I know we're all familiar with it, but let me just recount it briefly. In Matthew 25, the Bible tells us about a master who was leaving his house to travel. And before leaving, he entrusted his property to his servants, according to the abilities of each one. One servant got 5 talents, the second got 2, and the third received only 1. Now, a talent is a lot of money. And when he returned, he asked the servants for an accounting. The first and second servants said that they put the talents to work. And the one that got 5 talents got 5 more. The one that got 2 got 2 more. But the third servant took his and buried it in the dirt and came back with only 1. The Lord said to the first and second, he said, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things, and I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord." Now, this parable, if we want to put it in secular terms, basically says that you can't determine what cards are dealt. It's how you play your hand that determines your stewardship. And so when we look at average deficits, and I have computed with the assistance of Mr. Rick Lowe, the average deficits in millions of dollars over expenditure in millions of dollars, it tells an interesting story. The best year in the history of the Commonwealth of an independent Bahamas was 2000, when the average percent deficit, or the deficit that year, was 0.8%, or a deficit of 7.8 million with an expenditure of just shy of $1 billion, $958 million. The high will turn out to be 2020, which is a 44.3% deficit, or a total of $1.3 billion on an expenditure of $2.985 billion. From 1974 to 1981, the deficits range from 25% to a low of 3.1%. From 1982 to 1991, the deficits range from 24.3% to 2.9%, with an average of 11.9. You can write these numbers down. Something happened in 1992, and the deficits ranged from 14.1% in 1992 to 3.7% in 1994, with an average of 8.9%. You may be noticing a little trend here. From 1997 to 2001, the deficits range from 9.5% to 0.8%, with an average of 5.9%. Something happened in 2002, and the deficits ranged from that era, 2002 to 2006, from 18.8% to 6.9%, with an average of 13.7%. Seems to be a little difference depending on what 5-year period you're looking at. You had the global meltdown in 2008, 2009, and between 2007, 2011, the deficits ranged from 23% in 2009 to 11.5% in 2008, an average now of 17.8%. Move to the next era, 2012 to 2016, and the deficits range from 28.5% to 11.5%, with an average of 22.5%. And that era was noted for Hurricane Joaquin in September of 2015, $200 million cost to the economy, and Hurricane Matthew in 2016, $580 million. Let's move to current date, 2017 to 2020. I've already mentioned 2020, 2021, the deficit will be 44.3%. But if we exclude 2020, the deficit over the previous 3 years would only be 15.5%. And we know that in 2019, Hurricane Dorian exacted a toll of $3.4 billion to the economy. COVID-19, which started in March of 2020 to present, has ravaged economies around the world, and the total amount is incalculable. It's still being determined, but I am advised by financial experts that a reasonable number of the cost to the Bahamian economy to date is at least $3 billion. Worldwide, the economy shrank by 4.3%, with a loss of some $10 trillion. That's $10 million. And the source for that is The Economist, Finance and Economics, January 7th, 2021. So between Dorian and COVID-19, the Bahamas suffered as much as $6.4 billion, and yet we only have a deficit. I know that's hard to understand, to say only, when you can say that you have a deficit of 1.3 billion. But you've taken a hit in 2 years of $6.5 billion. So it's therefore no surprise that the damage to our main economic engine, tourism, and to every other business due to COVID, on top of the blow of Dorian, has left us in a very tight spot. Now, against that backdrop, we have state-owned enterprises that cost taxpayers upward of $400 million per year. We have the cost of money, or interest costs. In 2021, and this is a frightening reality, we shall spend some $512 million on interest. Add to that some $900 million on principal repayments due in the upcoming fiscal year. And yes, our total debt servicing obligation, principal and interest payments due, and we're about 50% of revenue will go to paying debt. Now, Mr. Speaker, we didn't get here overnight. We got here step by step, year after year, every year in an independent Bahamas, without exception. This is a sobering reality. And so we have a sovereign debt crisis. My new kids, Elijah and Lauren, both entered the world with $25,000 of debt each. Now, most people are familiar with total debt service ratios, or TDS. Some are familiar with gross debt service. So if you apply for a loan or a mortgage, the lender will ask you to outline your total income, your salary, how much money you get from investment, how much money you get from your rental units. Then look at your expenses. And in general, if your total debt service ratio is 40 or 45%, or in some cases lower, it's unlikely that you're going to get that loan. And the reason why is because you're more likely to default on that loan. So the Bahamas is in a similar spot. We may still be able to find money on the international market, but the cost of that money will have a premium for the lender. And eventually, it doesn't make sense to borrow. So remember the fate of Greece, of Italy, and Spain, because we ain't far from it. We are not far from it. So while the comparison between the Bahamian national budget and anybody's personal budget is methodologically imperfect, the bottom line is our historical consumption, our previous decisions bad, have consumed so much now that it takes half of our output. But even more sinister is it has leveraged the options for our children and our grandchildren. So the world is a different place, Mr. Speaker. This rapid deterioration between 2019 and now, some may say was not predictable. Some would say it was avoidable. But what it does do is highlight the structural weakness of this economy that we have collectively created over the last 50 years. So this year, when we pass this budget, it has to be never again. We either go left or we go right. We take the red pill or we take the blue pill. If we survive this, and we must, if we survive this, and we will, we have to make the adjustments necessary. We can no longer kick this reform down the road. So, Mr. Speaker, this is the time, now, today, not tomorrow, to start the road to resiliency and recovery. It's time to lock in fundamental reforms moving forward. And rather than just simply throwing stones, I'd like to make some recommendations as to what we should do. Let us acknowledge and book our total debt. Write it down. Let us, as the old people say, claim it. Find where the bodies are buried. At BMC, that's the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation. At BOB, the Bank of the Bahamas. At the BDB, Bahamas Development Bank. At Bahamas Air. At BPL. Let us look at our unbooked pension liabilities and write it down. All our accrued vacation leave. Let us speak openly about the state of the NIB fund and the challenged ability to provide benefits beyond 2028 or 2033, as the most recent actuarial reviews confirm. As painful politically as a national holistic come to Jesus moment will be, sugarcoating our current situation is not the way to go. After 2021, 2022, and I'm going to say it, we need to implement some belt tightening. Yes, I said it. Start with the state-owned enterprises and eliminate the concept of there's a bottomless pit for money. If I were to criticize this year's budget, I would say that it does not, in plain language, in incontrovertible ways, acknowledge that we are in deep trouble. There's no free lunch. We must now accept that things are different. We may have afforded champagne previously, but if we drink cider or beer, maybe we will emerge stronger and leaner. Let us accept that mortgage default rates of 40 to 50% helps no one. Let us carve out sustainable investments in the future, put a cost on the road to digital transformation, and let us fund it. Let us continue on the road to the autonomy of healthcare. Let us accept that the current model is broken. Promising free care to all results in substandard or no care for many. Capital investments in healthcare without maintenance contracts and continuous capital equipment repairs and upgrades is quite frankly nonsensical. Let us reassess the tax structure of the Bahamas to meet the annual funding needs of the government. If it requires income tax, let's do it voluntarily before somebody else makes us do it. Clearly, our tax system is inefficient and predicated on best case scenarios. Clearly, we are underperforming relative to best practices, collecting only between 15 and 18% of GDP, as opposed to the international norm of 22 to 25%. After 21-22, let us right-size the contingency for climate change and other catastrophic events. There will be more Hurricane Irmas. There will be more Hurricane Matthews. There will be more Hurricane Dorians. They are going to become the norm unless the world gets a handle on climate change. Let us shift some of the expenditure from the recurrent and focus more on capital. Let's get our capital expenditure annually up to as much as 10%. Let us look reasonably at public-private partnerships. Let's restructure the civil service. Finance the policies that impact ill health and the massive expenditures on diseases that lead to productive years of life loss. Let us get serious about the breadbasket reform to make healthy foods more affordable so that our people are not dying prematurely or living sick for the last 10 years of their life. I want to switch gears, Mr. Speaker, and talk about healthcare. In 1977, I left the Bahamas to train to become a surgeon. I went to Connecticut, and then Boston, and then Baltimore, and I finished up in Detroit, Michigan. 17 years after I left, I returned to my beloved country as a cardiac, vascular, and trauma specialist. I've served in a lot of capacities as a consultant, as a chief of surgery, as the president of the Medical Association, as the chairman of the Bahamas Medical Council, and finally, as minister. I thank the people of Elizabeth for the privilege to serve and the forbearance shown as I executed my duties. I resigned as minister in 2020, and I returned to the front lines of healthcare. And this is what I found. Much of my clinical activity is spent dealing with violence and trauma, NCDs, heart disease, kidney failure. There are significant challenges with access to healthcare. I want to tell the story of a patient that I met. I got permission to use his name. His name is Adrian Coakley. He is a 37-year-old Defense Force officer, admitted in August of 2020 with shortness of breath due to COVID-19. At the time, he was 440 pounds. He was hypertensive, and he couldn't breathe. I met him in the intensive care unit at Doctors Hospital. He rapidly deteriorated, required intubation and mechanical ventilation. And then he went on to develop kidney failure. But Adrian Coakley, an officer of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, while he was ill, understanding duty and understanding service, wanted to let his commanding officer know how he was doing. And I can recall vividly a video call where he could barely breathe, but he was able to salute his commanding officer. Mr. Speaker, this man got better by the grace of God, by the incredible team of doctors and nurses and other people, but he was buoyed by the love of his mother and his 6-year-old daughter, Aaliyah, who would video call him and make him feel strong enough to fight. We have an incredible team of healthcare workers, doctors, nurses, respiratory technicians, PCTs, OR staff, X-ray staff, doctors in various specialties who all worked on this patient. But his story tells the story of many Bahamians who have NCDs, because many of us are at high risk. Now, Adrian survived. He's been discharged He has lost 130 pounds since leaving the hospital. 130 pounds. He and I are going to go out and have a celebratory beer that he's going to pay for. Now, I want to talk specifically about COVID in the Bahamas. It seems as if we are starting to come out of the third wave, and I hope that the numbers bear that out. To date, we have had some 12,024 cases up until June the 6th. In April and May, we had more than twice the number of cases as March, and more than December, January, and February combined. As of June the 6th, the Bahamas had 12,024 cases. But how do you put that in context? The international average per million across countries is 22,391 cases per million of COVID to date, with 481.9 deaths per million. As of June the 6th, the Bahamas had 30,595 cases per million, with 590 deaths per million. But if we drill down on these numbers, we see that New Providence had 38,850. Now, bear in mind the international average, half of more, half of less. New Providence, 38,850. North Andros and the Berry Islands, 37,500. Cat Island, 46,649. Grand Bahama, 35,000. Bimini, 68,913 cases per million. There are some good lights. Long Island, 8,080 cases per million. Now, we need to thank some creative Bahamians. One is Alexander Hanna, who puts out a dashboard that complements the Ministry of Health's dashboard. Mr. Speaker, if we accept the premise that the economy of the Bahamas must be revved up and humming, if we accept that we have to be all in this together, if we believe that in the short term, tourism remains our best bet, and we've been speaking about diversification since I was a little boy, but even though diversify we must, it will not happen overnight. If we accept that there's a tremendous demand for vacations, as the honorable member for Freetown says, if we acknowledge that people have choices, if we value the role of every Bahamian, airline, airport staff, taxi driver, hair braider, straw vendor, restaurateur, hotelier, doctor, lawyer, engineer, Indian chief, this is going to be hard work. And it's going to require that we work harder than we want, for less than we feel we deserve, for longer than we think reasonable, because there's no pot of gold to be found. The Bible says, by the sweat of your brow, you shall eat bread until you return to the ground. And if I can leave you with one message today, that if we are going to survive, if we are going to get over the structural problem of 50 years of deficit spending, the Bahamas has to position itself as a COVID-free or COVID-safe destination for all of our businesses to survive, to thrive.
Chair recognizes the honorable member for Southern Shores.
I'm going to keep going. This week I move that the business of the House extends beyond the 1 p.m. hour.
Seconder. Honorable members, it's been moved and seconded that the business of this House extend beyond the 1 p.m. hour. As many members that are in favor will remain seated, those who oppose will stand. The business of this House will extend beyond the 1 p.m. hour. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Elizabeth.
So if we are going to make it through this, then the Bahamas has to claim that we are going to be the COVID-safe country in the world. Understand, all of us have to understand how a low COVID environment is critical to our collective and individual survival. We've got to test more than we're testing. We have to have good treatments. But most importantly, we have to vaccinate. So far, we have been fortunate to have vaccinated some 62, there have been 62,000 shots given. 48,000 plus have gotten their first shot, and 13,700 plus have gotten their second shot. That's only 4.7% of adults. Around the world, there have been some 2.18 billion COVID-19 vaccine shots given. The leader in number of doses per population is Gibraltar. But there are some countries like Israel and Canada and the UK where some 60 to 63% of their populations have gotten both shots. In the Americas, and there are 35 people in the Americas region, or the Pan-American Health Region, the leader is Chile. The Bahamas, I'm afraid to say, we rank number 26 out of 35, having given only 14 doses per 100 people. Barbados ranking much higher than us. They've given 49 doses per 100 people. Jamaica, way behind us, 6 doses per 100. And Nicaragua in pulling up the rear at 2.5. Now, I get it that people are afraid about vaccination. There's been a lot of discussion back and forth about side effects, about whether this is an experiment, about whether Black and brown people are going to get sterilized, whether there's a conspiracy. I get it. Vaccine hesitancy is greater among Black and brown people around the world for good reason. And yet, Mr. Speaker, this is an existential issue for the Bahamas. And so what we now need to do is we need to address people to understand their concerns, not be dismissive, not to suggest that they're crazy or that they're dumb or that they're stupid, but to be loving and compassionate and understanding about the various concerns that people have, because they have real concerns. Let us engage our public. One by one, we can increase the number of people that are vaccinated. It will take a national effort in order to increase vaccination. I do not, Mr. Speaker, and I will say it on this platform, I do not yet have the confidence that children, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, even when a vaccine is available, and there is none yet available, that the value proposition for vaccination of children has met my standard of consideration. And so for right now, we've got to focus on the adults. I have been vaccinated. I've gotten both vaccines. I got my second dose on the first day that I could. I would encourage you to get vaccinated. Now, Mr. Speaker, I am briefly going to speak about a national security issue. And that is that we are losing our nurses in droves. They're leaving, they're resigning, some of them are dying. I believe, without exaggeration, that this is probably one of the single greatest threats to national security and safety. You see, nurses form the backbone of healthcare delivery in all countries, including the Bahamas. It has evolved from a field of generalists to specialists. In addition to midwives, they're critical care nurses, perioperative nurses, dialysis, emergency department nurses, nursing practitioners in multiple specialties, nurse anesthetists, wound care specialists, enterostomal therapists. Contact with a registered nurse is a critical and essential part of good patient outcomes. In the private sector, in the intensive care units, we've lost up to 50% of our critical care nurses. I attended a going away party for one on Monday. At PMH, we cannot open up our intensive care unit to full capacity because we don't have enough nurses. This is a critical problem, Mr. Speaker. You can have all the whistles and bells, you can have the biggest towers, but if you don't have the human capital, we are not going to be able to care for our people. You see, COVID has interfered with the practical training of all healthcare professionals, doctors and nurses. Graduate nurses in particular in the Bahamas have had their clinical experience delayed because of COVID and despite the paucity of nurses. Over the years, we have not provided the level of compensation for nurses that they deserve. The average nursing salary in the United States right now, and they are sucking all of our nurses out of the Bahamas, the average nursing salary is $80,000 a year for a nurse. Median is $75,000, and in California, the average is $120,000. Some healthcare systems in Atlanta are paying between $10,000 and $30,000 signing bonus. We have not yet completed the revision of the Nursing Act. And in the public sector, we have some shortage of 300 RNs and 102 TCNs. Mr. Speaker, as I get ready to conclude, I think a critical part of the way forward is addressing nutrition. And I hope that as we move forward, the never again is that we finally put the last nail in the coffin of corned beef. But that's another issue. I see the honorable member for Cat Island got his corned beef right there. So as I conclude, Mr. Speaker, we must now embrace ideas that substantively transform the Bahamas. Let us claim where we are. Let us state categorically that never again will we allow ourselves to get into this situation that we have all contributed to. Maybe we can position the Bahamas for LPIA to become the hub for Central America and the Caribbean, or the convention center for the hemisphere. Let's position the Bahamas as the trading hub for the world, given its proximity to the international shipping lanes. But most importantly, let us acknowledge that we are at a defining moment, and that despite the political kryptonite, we are prepared to make the right decisions. We've made them before. It is going to demand tremendous fortitude, love, and commitment to the children and grandchildren of this country. And with that, Mr. Speaker, Elizabeth supports the compendium of bills that comprise the 2021-2022 budget of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Elizabeth, you had a document that you indicated that you would table. I would like to see it. Honorable Member, order that the document be brought up. Order that the document to lie on the table. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Central Grand Bahama. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Southern Shores.
Speaker, I move that the business of the House suspend for the luncheon break until 3 p.m. today's date.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the business of this House be suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon. As many members that are in favor will remain seated, those who oppose will stand. The business of this House stands suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
All right.